President Trump heads to Las Vegas days after the largest mass shooting in U.S. history. He'll meet with victims and first responders. 20-week abortion ban. The House passes a major piece of pro-life legislation backed by the White House. Will it pass the Senate? Christian persecution. A day after testifying with me on Capitol Hill, an American tells us about his push to get the U.S. to help. And meeting with young people, what the Pope wants to learn from them. We'll have a report from Rome. On EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, October 4th, 2017. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. President Trump is inviting those injured in Sunday's Las Vegas massacre to the White House. Meanwhile, investigators continue to search for clues in the largest mass shooting in U.S. history. It killed 58 people and wounded hundreds. The gunman's girlfriend, a person of interest, has returned to the U.S., is being questioned. Police hope she might provide information on a motive. 62-year-old Mary Lou Danley was in the Philippines during Sunday's attack. Danley arrived at Los Angeles International Airport last night, where she was met by FBI agents. Investigators say the alleged gunman, Stephen Paddock, recently wired $100,000 to the Philippines. President Trump is calling it a very sad day as he and the First Lady visit Las Vegas. He met with survivors and law enforcement officials at the University Medical Center. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. The president landed in Las Vegas and immediately headed to the hospital where he thanked doctors, and he praised those who helped on the ground and even those who were injured who told other people to take ambulances. He's not the only one trying to bring comfort. I spoke to the Vicar General from the Diocese of Las Vegas, who is doing the same.
Accompanied by the First Lady, President Trump offers his gratitude to the Las Vegas shooting first responders. The president also met with shooting victims, medical professionals, and civilian heroes.
The doctors, the nurses, all of the people at the hospital have done a job that's indescribable. The message that I have is we have a great country and we are there for you.
Mr. Trump is acting as consoler. It's a role that Father Bob Stokig, the Vicar General of the Las Vegas Diocese, knows well.
One of our parishes has a mother and daughter who were both at the concert, both injured. The daughter, thankfully, has been released, but the mom is still in critical condition at the hospital.
The Shrine of the Most Holy Redeemer is across the street from the site of the brutal massacre. It's being used by police as they continue their investigation. That's where Father Stokig was ordained as a priest and where he's ministered to officers after the tragedy.
To be able to cry with some of them who just needed someone to cry with for a moment, to be able to just say, we're grateful, we want you to know that we walk with you through this, that was a wonderful spiritual experience for me.
Father Stokig tells me support has been flooding in from all over the world. He mentioned a touching letter the Bishop of Las Vegas received from the Bishops' Conference in France. It said, "We know what you were going through because we've been through this so much ourselves." They are referring to all of the terror attacks that have taken place in recent years in France. Lauren.
Democrats on Capitol Hill this morning spoke out in favor of stricter gun laws. Did the president offer any comment today about gun control?
The president is not focusing on gun control. He said, we're not going to talk about that today, but he has said it's an issue that will be looked at as time goes by.
Correspondent Mark Irons at the White House. Thank you, Mark. The U.S. House of Representatives has passed a bill banning abortions after 20 weeks. President Trump supports the legislation, but it will likely not get to him. The bill now heads to the Senate, where Senator Lindsey Graham will reintroduce the pain-capable bill tomorrow. It needs 60 votes to pass, and with Republicans holding only 52 seats, the bill is not expected to survive. The chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee says a panel is continuing to investigate possible collusion between Russia and associates of the Trump campaign, but it has not reached a conclusion. Senator Richard Burr also commented on Facebook ads linked to Russia.
Many of you have asked us, are we going to release the Facebook ads? We don't release documents provided to our committee, period.
Facebook turned the ads over to the committee earlier this month as part of the panel's investigation. The committee is examining Russian efforts to push out social media messages on Twitter and Facebook. The Trump administration is preparing a $29 billion disaster aid package for hurricane victims. It comes as the White House hints at the possibility of wiping out Puerto Rico's massive debt.
Well, I think the president knows that in order for Puerto Rico long-term to fix itself, it's going to have to deal with that debt situation. I think everybody agrees that. The country was poorly, the territory was very poorly run for a very long time.
Office of Management and Budget Director Mick Mulvaney did not offer much clarity on what the president meant. Mr. Trump criticized the island over its years-long financial crises while visiting the territory yesterday. Tensions remain high in Spain tonight as the country grapples with its most serious national crisis in decades. The leader of Catalonia, a region in the northeast of the country, says they're just days away from declaring independence. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee is here, joins us with the details. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. Catalonia's regional government is still mulling over when exactly they will declare themselves independent, but some say it may happen as soon as Monday. Top EU officials are hoping that won't happen, calling on Spain and Catalonia to resolve their differences following a series of violent protests. Striking workers, students, and hundreds of thousands of protesters take to the streets of Barcelona to rally against police violence. This man says the police's brutality in recent days is unforgivable. He accuses them of not allowing people to express themselves and live in freedom. Most of the protests are happening in Barcelona, in the northeast region of Catalonia. The area has its own unique language and culture, but is still part of Spain. Tensions have been high since Sunday. That's when some 900 were hurt after Spanish police cracked down on a regional independence vote the central government calls illegal.
Todos hemos sido testigos de los hechos que se han ido produciendo en Cataluña.
Spain's King, Felipe VI, addressed the nation, saying Catalan authorities bent the law with irresponsible behavior. He says Catalan society is fractured. Catalonia's lawmakers are rejecting the King's call for unity. They report 90% of voters backed independence, but less than half the region actually cast a vote. Many world leaders, like President Trump, are not in favor of Catalonia separating from Spain. He voiced his opinion while welcoming Spain's prime minister to Washington last week.
I think that Spain is a great country and it should remain united.
Mike Gonzalez, an expert in European politics, says the U.S. position makes sense.
Nation states like to deal with nation states. A lot of European countries have their own regions to deal with. I'm a bit surprised by the EU because the EU is more comfortable dealing with regions because the EU wants to arrogate to itself as much power as possible.
Mike Gonzalez says there's also an economic reason why Catalonia might want to split from Spain. Catalonia is the richest region in the country and pays a large amount of taxes. It's also important to note there are many Catalans that do not want to leave Spain. They did not vote in Sunday's referendum in protest. Lauren?
Spain is a predominantly Catholic country. Did Catholic leaders weigh in on this?
They did, Lauren. We actually heard from the Archbishop of Barcelona, Cardinal Juan Jose Omeya, who condemned the violence. The Cardinal and other bishops say it's important to find a peaceful and democratic way of solving the conflict. So they're encouraging prayer, obviously, but the important thing here is dialogue.
We'll see what happens if it splits or not splits. Okay, thank you so much, Wyatt Goolsbee.
Thanks, Lauren.
The Bishop of the Rohingya territory talks about the violence in Myanmar. Cardinal Charles Bo tells a Vatican news agency it is urgent to respect human dignity and build peace. The Cardinal is appealing for peace. Pope Francis will visit Myanmar next month. U.S. officials are expected to cut Cuba's diplomatic staff in Washington by 2/3. This after the U.S. ordered non-essential diplomats and their families to leave Havana following mysterious attacks on personnel. American officials believe someone has been targeting diplomats, possibly with some type of sonic weapon. Officials in Mexico raised the death toll of the 7.1 magnitude earthquake to 367 people. The last remaining bodies were recovered from a collapsed office building in Mexico City. The earthquake on September 19th followed an even stronger one in southern states of Oaxaca and Chiapas. They killed nearly 100 people. A priest in Colombia is killed during an attempted robbery. This happened in Rio Negro yesterday when two criminals approached the clergyman and asked for his wallet. After he refused, they shot him. The two suspects have been arrested. This is the second killing of a priest in Colombia this year. The Pope has announced he will gather young people from around the world, Catholics, non-Catholics, even atheists. He wants to hear firsthand from them about how the Catholic Church can better minister to youth today. Juliette Lindley, EWTN's Vatican correspondent, has more from Rome.
Speaking today at the general audience in St. Peter's Square, Pope Francis underscored the importance of including youngsters in the preparation process. And listening is what the Vatican has been focusing on in unprecedented ways, including online questionnaires and new websites, and now a Vatican summit of young people. Young Catholics, along with members of other Christian churches and other faiths, will hold discussions with teachers, seminarians, and experts involved in helping them choose their path in life. Next March's gathering comes on the heels of a seminar held just a few weeks ago here in Rome, gauging how the Church reaches youth.
When young people were able to rate the Church's ability to listen to young people, the Church was rated as a 6 out of 10. So there's so much potential to improve in the way that the Church listens to young people.
The youth meeting will help bishops prepare for their conference known as a synod. The theme is youth, faith, and vocational discernment. Basically, what are these kids going to do with their lives?
Finding vocation is something that's important to everyone. I don't think it's possible to live a full and meaningful life without spending time discerning and spending time searching for that vocation.
Father Ted Trinko is 26. He found his vocation very early on. He says prayer is crucial.
For me, there was from 16 until 18, there was a strong period of discernment. And perhaps the most important part of that period of discernment, for me at least, was the taking of the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius of Loyola. I mean, it was something which perhaps isn't so well known all around, but St. Ignatius wrote those spiritual exercises to help us find God's will for us in our lives.
The pre-synod meeting will coincide with the Palm Sunday celebrations in St. Peter's Square, during which the Holy Father will celebrate World Youth Day. In Rome, Juliette Lindley, EWTN News Nightly.
Coming up, Christian persecution. We'll talk to an American who testified on Capitol Hill about the need for money in Iraq. And helping the unemployed.
Denunciar las situaciones.
Pope Francis announces his prayer intentions for October.
Pidamos, hermanos, por el mundo del trabajo.
The Holy Father's prayer intention for the month of October that all workers and the unemployed are helped. In his monthly video, Pope Francis prays that they may receive the opportunity to contribute to the common good. President Trump's pick to oversee international religious freedom promises to defend the persecuted. Senators question Kansas Governor Sam Brownback during his confirmation hearing. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi brings us the highlights.
It's just situation keeps getting worse.
Kansas Governor Sam Brownback promises to fight religious persecution. President Trump nominated him to be the ambassador at large for international religious freedom.
This is a fundamental right that you have to do with your own soul what you choose. This is your right. You need to be able to do it without interference by government or groups. This is a right that we will stand up and defend wherever you are, whoever you are, whatever you believe, or no belief at all.
Brownback is a former senator known as a social conservative. He shared his Catholic faith and pro-life views on News Nightly. Today, he promises to be bipartisan. But still, Democratic senators challenge Brownback about homosexuality and abortion.
I think the key piece is to stay in the lane of religious freedom, and those things that start to pull you out of it, that you shouldn't go there, whether it's the issue you're talking about or others, just because this one is so critical and difficult enough as it is.
Religious freedom scholar Dr. Tom Farr predicts Brownback will be very successful. But Farr worries Brownback will have to fight State Department indifference.
Not hostility necessarily. People don't know about it. They're dimly aware of the religious persecution that goes on overseas.
Brownback would be charged with monitoring religious persecution around the globe and promoting policies for religious freedom.
If we don't get it right, if we don't have religious freedom around the world, you're going to see a continuation of many more conflicts like we have today, and probably growing and accelerating taking place. I think this issue is just so critical.
We expect Governor Brownback will be confirmed as the next ambassador at large for international religious freedom. But back in his home state, he's not the most popular guy. A Morning Consult poll finds him the second most unpopular governor in the whole country. Here at the Capitol, Jason Calvi, EWTN News Nightly.
The U.S. government is refuting testimony given to Congress yesterday about the lack of U.S. money getting to Christians and other religious minorities in Iraq. During a hearing on Capitol Hill yesterday, Stephen Rasha, legal counsel for the Chaldean Catholic Archdiocese of Erbil in Iraq, testified beside me on the plight of Christians in the region. He told lawmakers that the lack of funding is causing the church to make excruciating decisions, either returning Christians to towns without water and power or encouraging them to leave. And joining me now is the man who made those assertions, Stephen Rasha. Wonderful to have you here on set.
Thanks for having me.
Last time I saw you, besides yesterday, was in Iraq, where you were my guide, taking me through, showing me all of the areas there. And you spend most of your time helping Christians there. You said yesterday the U.S. and UN money is not reaching those Christians. How do you know that?
Well, because we're there on the ground and we see what's happening every day. We live there, we work there. We don't need a report to tell us what we're not receiving. It's pretty self-evident to us.
The government said, a U.S. official said, we reached out to the White House and to USAID, that's the agency in charge of international development. He calls you a liar, essentially. He says, quote, any assertion that the U.S. is not providing support to vulnerable communities in Iraq is false. It is also false to claim the United States has not provided assistance that reaches Christian and other minority communities in Iraq. Are you lying?
Well, certainly not. I think it's a little bit of a broad statement from the speaker. I would say first that I wasn't the only speaker yesterday that came back with that conclusion. Former Congressman Frank Wolf went on a fact-finding mission to in northern Iraq in August and came back with exactly the same conclusion, which he testified to. Secondly, I would say I have no doubt, and we have no doubt that the people inside the government, whether it's state, AID, UN, wherever, have reports to show that they're allocating funds and doing work. We don't deny that. Our argument has been you need to be checking to see how these dollars are actually being applied on the ground, because we don't see the effect of that.
Let's talk about funding. You're on the Nineveh Reconstruction Committee helping to rebuild the towns. When we reached out to them to say, where are these funds? Can you ensure that they are reaching the most vulnerable of Iraq? This is what they said. Since fiscal year 2014, the government provided nearly $1.7 billion to address humanitarian needs of Iraqis, including religious minorities. USAID Administrator Mark Green has announced another $264 million in assistance. That happened on September 20th, they said. And the U.S. has provided $115 million, with more pledged to the UNDP funding facility for stabilization. Let's start with that $1.7 billion.
Yeah, it's a big number, which makes it even more appalling that we're unable to see its effects. This is not a difficult equation. If that work was being done, people would see it, and we don't see it. And this is what we're telling the people. Stop focusing on what you think is happening on this end in Washington, D.C., and start listening to the priests and the bishops and the lay workers who are on the ground in these towns, and the people themselves who are telling you we are not seeing these benefits.
Thank you so much for joining me, Steve Rasha. Wonderful to have you back.
Thank you.
Up next, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton talks about his state's ban on sanctuary cities. Plus, celebrating Mass for the first time in months. We'll tell you where. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Today is the feast of St. Francis of Assisi. The friar founded the Franciscan order and is the patron saint of animals. You can head to EWTN News Nightly's Facebook page right now to view a reflection on St. Francis. It's done by our chaplain here in Washington, Father Patrick Mary. The two sponsors of the DREAM Act of 2017 hold a press conference today with so-called dreamers, or those brought to the U.S. illegally as children.
I've never seen more bipartisan support for the idea than right this moment. The American people have heard you, they share your dream, and overwhelmingly support your dream.
Senator Lindsey Graham and Democrat Senator Dick Durbin spoke today on Capitol Hill to push support for their legislation, which seeks to grant legal status to those dreamers. The bill is still in committee. A federal appeals court in Texas last week upheld parts of a new controversial law blocking local sanctuary city policies across the state. Those policies ignore federal immigration law. Cities that have them don't turn over illegal immigrants who are criminals to the federal government. Joining us now, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, who defends his state's law. The law outlaws sanctuary cities. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming back. You're defending it. Why is it so important to defend that law?
Well, one is my job is to defend all Texas law. Second of all, this is passed by duly elected representatives of our state and then signed by our governor. So it's good policy, and we're going to defend it.
Why is it being fought?
Well, because I think it's a safety issue. It really is. It's about protecting people in our state from illegals who have either been charged with a crime or suspected of a crime or who have committed crimes. So this isn't about any other category of people. It is about criminals or suspected criminals that need to be deported.
I think people don't understand that. I think that they get a little confused. Tell me if I'm wrong. That what about immigrants seeking a better life? What about how do we balance that law with compassion? This is about criminals.
That's correct. This, I think, a false narrative by others who are opposed to this, who are not actually stating what the bill does. But read the bill. It is about criminals and illegals and that category alone.
Let's switch to abortion laws in your state. In November, the state of Texas is taking Planned Parenthood to court. And you're seeking to overturn a court decision that blocks Texas from cutting off state Medicaid funding to the abortion provider. Why are you doing this?
Well, our governor and our Health and Human Services decided to cut off funding to Planned Parenthood because they were doing unethical practices, doing procedures they shouldn't have done. There's videos that support this. And so in November, we have the opportunity, 5-day trial, where we get to expose exactly what Planned Parenthood is doing.
And you're also involved in a dismemberment case?
That's correct. So the legislature, again, passed by the legislature this last spring, passed a dismemberment abortion ban so that you can no longer dismember babies that are unborn. And so we were sued over that. We're now defending that, and we'll be defending that also in November.
Who sued you?
So we were sued by just various groups that are opposed to it.
Yeah, and they are saying basically this is unconstitutional, I would imagine?
Yes, they are. So the argument that the legislature, even though it was duly passed, that it's unlawful, and we're pretty confident we can defend it.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Finally tonight, a cathedral in Marawi, Philippines, heavily damaged by militants connected to ISIS, is celebrating Mass for the first time in 4 months. It happened at St. Mary's Cathedral. The building was damaged by terrorists. Church members put as much as they could back together for the celebration. The Army says fighting still remains in the city, and it will take a little bit more time to put an end to that violence. And in a world where it seems there is so much evil, it is heartwarming to hear that that church has been reopened. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. We'll be back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless you.